So today we're launching this brand new series, Christmas at the Movies. So if you weren't here last year, if you're kind of new with us, so what we do is we watch about 25 minutes or so of a Christmas movie. And the good news is you don't have to hear me babble for 25 or 30 minutes. I'll do that at the end of the movie for 25 or 30 minutes. So I'm just kidding, I won't babble that long. And so today's movie is The Grinch. So you can silence your cell phones. If you need some popcorn, go out to the cafe, get some popcorn. Get something to drink, and we'll settle in, and we'll watch this movie, and I'll come back out in a little bit, and we'll pull out some spiritual lessons from The Grinch. You know, I think there's a better title for this movie. I think How the Grinch Stole Christmas is kind of irrelevant. I think a better title would be Why the Grinch Stole Christmas, or at least a better question. Like, what drives that kind of behavior? What causes people to be angry and hateful and bitter? And I think the answer lies with Cindy Lou's dad when she said, "Hey, why doesn't anybody ever talk about the Grinch?" Remember what he said? He says, "Well, the Grinch is really a who. He's a who who's not really a who. He's more of a what." It's more of a what. And so this, if you haven't seen this version of the Grinch, there's a whole backstory to why the Grinch is the Grinch. And it started with his childhood because he was a little different than everybody else. And so he was treated differently. And he was picked on and he was bullied. And so he grew up and he just shut people out. And he lived this life of isolation and bitterness and ultimately revenge. And so let me just go Dr. Seuss on you for a minute. When you treat a who like a what, you get what you got. When you treat a who like a what, you get what you got. And I think the story in this is that everybody's a who no matter what. Everybody's a who no matter what. When we treat people less than, when we don't show people kindness and respect, and everybody deserves kindness and respect. Respect is God-given because we're all created in the image of God. And when we don't show kindness and respect to other people, it drives and it nurtures bad behavior. If you just look at the mass shootings we've witnessed in this country over the last 2 decades, many of them came at the hands of a human being who wasn't treated like a human being. That they were bullied, they were overlooked, they were made fun of, they were picked on, they were picked last, they were not picked at all. They were dehumanized, devalued, and when somebody doesn't feel value, they don't value anything else. And I'm not saying that justifies the behavior, nor am I saying that that's true of every horrific event we've ever seen. But what I am saying is this, that nothing good happens when we're not good to one another. You know that's true. Nothing good happens when we're not good to one another. Does anything good happen when you're not good to your spouse? Does anything good happen when you're not good to your coworkers? Does anything good happen when you're not good to your clients, your customers, your friends, your neighbors? Nothing good happens when we're not good to each other. And so when we treat a who like a what, we get what we got. And this is why the golden rule is so golden. Like Jesus said, he said it very simply, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. And even if you're not a Jesus follower, even if you don't believe in Jesus, I'm telling you, your life would be better if you followed the principle of Jesus, the teaching of Jesus. Just think about that. Like if you treated other people the way you wanted to be treated, wouldn't that change some things? It would change some things in your life. It would certainly change some things in other people's life. And can you imagine a world where we all just live by that principle? Like if we just did to others, if every day we just treated other people the way we wanted to be treated, that would change the landscape of our culture. And I know it would happen because it happened in the first century with the first group of Jesus followers, who just loved people and showed kindness to people, even their enemies. It's almost like Jesus knew what he was talking about. One of my favorite stories in the Bible comes from the Old Testament in the life of David. And David was chosen by God to be the second king of Israel, to take the place of King Saul. Because King Saul, the authority and the power went to his head, and he began to treat who's like what's, including David, who was not only his son's best friend, but his daughter's husband. So David was Saul's son-in-law, and Saul tried to kill David. Now you think your in-laws are bad. And it all started when they're having dinner together and David's playing the harp and Saul lunges a spear at David. Now, some scholars think that the reason he lunged a spear at David is because on the harp he began playing Christmas music prior to Thanksgiving. And so I don't know if that's true, but if it is, I empathize with him. But anyway, it sets him on this 8-year run. 8 years he ran from Saul trying to protect and save his own life. And eventually, and we're going to do a whole series on the life of David in February. You should come back because it's a fascinating story. But eventually, Saul and Jonathan are killed in battle, and David becomes king. And 2 Samuel 8:15 says, David did what was just and right for all his people. And we pick this story up in 2 Samuel chapter 9, and the passages will be on the screen for you to follow along, if I can get there. The king, David, asked, "Is there no one still alive from the house of Saul to whom I can show God's kindness?" Ziba answered the king, and Ziba was one of Saul's servants, said, "There is still a son of Jonathan. He is lame in both feet. Where is he?" The king asked. Now, Saul treated David like a what? And David was committed to treating Saul's family like a who? To do unto others whatever he would have them do unto him, to treat other people the way he would want to be treated. And so he asked, "Is there anybody left in Saul's house that I can bless?" And there was a son, Jonathan's son, Saul's grandson, Mephibosheth, who was crippled, lame in both feet. And that's important to the story. Because in that culture, a crippled person, anybody who had this physical ailment, blind, lame, whatever, they were considered whats, not whos. They were given no value because they weren't considered valuable to anybody else. They couldn't work. They couldn't contribute. They were forced to beg for everything, and so people just overlooked them all of the time. They treated them like dead people. And David doesn't say, wait, no, I asked if there was anybody still alive. He doesn't say that. He says, "Where is he? Bring him to me." In verse 6, when Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, came to David, he bowed down to pay him honor. Listen to this. David said, "Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth." When do you think the last time was that anybody uttered his name? Spent most of his life overlooked, ignored, forgotten. Probably been years since anybody had said his name, and David honors him and he restores his humanity, he restores his dignity when he calls out his name. And Mephibosheth says, "At your service." And then David says, "Don't be afraid, for I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will restore to you all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will always eat at my table." And look at his response, verse 8. Mephibosheth bowed down and said, "What is your servant?" Not who is your servant. What is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me? Now, dogs in that culture were worthless, but Mephibosheth takes it a step further. I am more worthless than a dog. I'm a dead dog. Why are you treating a what like me like a who like you? And here's why. Because David had spent the bulk of his 20s running from King Saul, being treated like a what. And he knows this, that nothing good happens when we're not good to one another. In fact, David dealt with his own issues of anger and bitterness and rage and value and worth, to the point that he almost murdered an innocent man. Because of the way that the king treated him, it impacted him so deeply, so emotionally, that he almost murdered an innocent man. And then a woman named Abigail comes and shows him kindness and grace and mercy, and it changes his story forever. And David begins to write this different story. He wants to be a different kind of guy because he knows that nothing good happens when we're not good to one another. And so he vows to be good to Mephibosheth. And it says this in verse 9. Then the king summoned Ziba, Saul's steward, and said to him, "I've given your master's grandson everything that belonged to Saul and his family. You and your sons and your servants are to farm the land for him and bring in the crops so that your master's grandson may be provided for, and Mephibosheth, grandson of your master, will always eat at my table." So Mephibosheth ate at David's table like one of the king's sons. He ate at the table like a who? Because he was a who. In verse 13, "And Mephibosheth lived in Jerusalem because he always ate at the king's table. And he was lame in both feet." Now the story started with this detail. He was lame, he was crippled. It ends with the same detail. He's still lame, still crippled. Nothing changes about Mephibosheth's physical condition, but everything changed about his emotional condition. That he was a what to the culture, but a who to the king. See, kindness didn't change his condition, it changed his position. Kindness didn't change his condition, it changed his position. Kindness to your neighbor who's going through a tough marriage won't change the marriage. It won't change the marriage. But knowing that you love them through it can change their outlook. Kindness won't change your coworker's problem, but knowing that you care enough to walk with them through it, to ask them how they're doing, can change their posture. See, when we're willing to step into one another's messes and treat people with the kindness and respect that they deserve, because everybody's a who, no matter what, it doesn't change their circumstances, but it has the potential to change them. Like, we can deal with just about anything in life as long as we know two things: that we're not alone and that we're loved. Like, there's nothing you can't handle, there's nothing I can't handle if I know that I'm not alone and that I'm loved. And this is the story of Christmas. This is the story of Jesus. Jesus came so that we would know these two things: that we are loved and we are not alone. And the King of the universe stepped into our mess, into our lair, and invited us in, and he gives us a seat at the table. See, all of us are crippled with sin. All of us are lame with shame, and Jesus looks past all of our what to see the who that's really you. His kindness changes our position. He gives us a seat at the table, but his grace changes our condition. His grace changes our heart. His grace causes our heart to grow 10 times bigger, +2. And so we move from this condition of guilt to this condition of forgiveness. Paul writes this in Romans 5. He says, "You see, at just the right time, when we were still powerless, when our heart was still 3 sizes too small, Christ died for the ungodly." God demonstrates his own love for us in this: that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Now, if you don't know that Jesus, we would love to have a conversation with you about him. And you can just text the word decision to the number on the screen, and someone from our team will call you or email you and have a conversation about what that looks like. But I think that's true. If you do know that Jesus and you've given your life to him, I want you to remember this Christmas that kindness is our posture, and that kindness is not optional for us. As believers, we show kindness to one another. In a world full of Grinches, we're called to be a Cindy Lou. In a world full of Mephibosheths, because we all have them in our lives. Right? We're called to be a David. So who do you need to show kindness to? Who is it in your office? Who is it in your classroom? Who is it down the street whose world may change if you would simply step into it, call them by name, and shower them with kindness and compassion, because that's our role. See, in a world of people who've been treated like a what, we're called to love them like a who, because Jesus died for everybody, even a who like you, and a who like me too. Let's pray. Father, we're just grateful for this season and the reminder that you didn't leave us alone, and you didn't leave us unloved, but you stepped in the middle of our mess Because we're all a who's worth dying for. So we remember that now as we take communion, as we take this piece of bread that reminds us of your sacrifice on the cross, that as we drink this cup that reminds us of the blood that was shed for our sins. And that calls us back to the table to dine with the King. Pray in Jesus' name.